it leaking? Yep.
Radiator's
Yep.
busted.
Oh, the radiator's busted?
Yep.
So I guess I won't be driving this one. Always the train going by. Maybe I should drive this one now before all the coolant leaks out.
Yeah, bottom tank is leaking.
Oh yeah.
Shoot.
No, that's the block-off plate where the suspension drive would go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no wonder his AC doesn't work. He doesn't have a belt.
Your radiator's busted.
You're leaking.
Oh, shit. We'll have to take it down
Yeah.
to L&S or somebody.
Yep.
What happened?
Looks like your bottom
it's
tank
old.
is
Well, hey y'all, welcome to Doug's Cars. It was my birthday last week, and so in honor of that, I'm driving a car from the year I was born. And it even comes with a built-in bench, so I'm sitting here on the bumper. You can tell by the star here that it is a German luxury sedan. It is actually an S-Class in German taxi beige. Taxi! This is actually a comfortable place to sit here on the front. This is a 280 SE from 1977. So it's the base S-Class. There was a 280S, which was carbureted. They didn't really sell that very well, and I think they'd already phased them out of the US market by 77. So this is the base S-Class in that year. It's got a 2.8 liter straight six M110 with Bosch mechanical fuel injection, and the fuel injection system was actually made out of iron then. So it had some rust issues. In the next generation, they went to aluminum. Let's take a look around this car and we'll take it for a drive. It has a slight coolant issue, so maybe my drive will be a little shorter than usual, but the owner's given me permission, and you know, the coolant issue was not my fault, not this time. So we start down here, you can see the coolant issue, but there's the US spec bumpers and these bumperettes that I always thought were a bit odd, but a lot of Mercedes from there had them. Fog lights, and then of course the quad headlights there. The bubbly rust here was not included from the factory. You can see this one does not have the Bund wheels. It has the color coordinated matched full wheel covers, and then the odd pieces of trim here, like this would never be on a modern car. Like what is this for? Why is there a place here for like your fingers to go, yet the trim has also got another piece of trim on it that's in body color? But anyway, that's how they did things back then. You've got full body side molding protection on this long S-Class sedan, and you've got other weird trim things like this thing here that man, why are the back doors locked? It's got it on the front door too. You can see it's like this weird, like, I don't know, it's just what was the reason for that little styling cue there where it kind of blocks part of the window? I don't know. But the designer of this car this was the last car he designed, and he had been designing Mercedes since the 30s. Back here you've got another lovely park bench bumper, and here you can see clearly that this is the base S-Class. It is an S-Class, Sonderklasse, which of course means special class, and this was, because this was the biggest and most luxurious, well, not this one, this is the base model, but still the biggest and most luxurious class of Mercedes at the time, and E for Einspritzung, which means fuel injection. So simple enough. This also was one of the first models that Mercedes created these taillights for, which have these like strafes in them. Ostensibly, the dirt would collect on these when you were driving, like on a dusty road or something, and you would still be able to see the brake lights and the turn signals light up. Whether or not that worked, I don't know. But this was a standard feature on Mercedes as well into the 21st century. This was not. You got to thank some bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. for this absurdity, atrocity that made the Melees era what it is. And this 2.8 liter had like 180 horsepower in the rest of the world, but here in the US, 142. It had all kinds of restrictive emissions controls on it. But this car will still, move down the road okay. Probably not as well as this old rolls. But with all this extra weight and the less horsepower, this was not a sporting sedan like it might have been in Europe. But it is a luxury car, and that's what we came to expect from Mercedes by the late 70s in the US. So it has pretty much everything on it as standard that would have been an option in Europe. Let's take a quick look under the hood. We'll jump inside, and then I'll put the keys in and we'll take her for a ride before all the coolant leaks out. Alrighty, I can't film actually opening the hood because you have to get a catch on this side at the same time that you get a catch on this side, and I need one hand to holds y'all up so you can see. So this is the 2.8 liter straight six. Yeah, obviously this is a driver. It's not a fantastic quality car, as you can tell here. Actually, it's a really nice car. I'm just kidding. But it, you know, obviously the air conditioning is non-functional because there's no belt. I found the problem. That'll be $179 diagnostic charge. But let's see, the oil goes there. And this is where the hydraulic suspension pump would be. If this were a non-US market car, the hydraulic suspension would raise and lower the height of the car with a very like a Citroen. But because that would raise and lower the height of these massive bumpers, it was illegal in the US, of course, because some guy sitting in an office in Washington, D.C. said that. So nobody could enjoy that. If that guy is still working there, which I doubt, he needs a new job because hydraulic suspension is awesome. Anyway, this is under the hood. You can get it, you know, there's a distributor cap and everything. And you know, it is what it is. It's very simple. There's no plastic under here. There's your coil, regular battery, washer fluid bottle, and then various and sundry hoses and belts and smog pumps and things like that that killed the power of this car. So with that, I'm going to close this up and we'll hop inside. This, by the way, is a massively heavy chrome door handle that has a fantastic feel. And then when we get inside the car, you can see the Zebrano wood trim that was on pretty much every Mercedes back then. And you got the clear and concise gauges with oil temp, oil pressure temp, fuel tank, 142,000 miles on the speedo, on the odometer. And then you had your quartz clock and tach. Usual headlight switch here and turn signal and wiper stalk, which at the time had already become combined. Cruise control stalk here, and the 4-spoke safety steering wheel. Now you notice on the door, you've got a nice hockey stick door pull and recessed MB Tex interior, leather vinyl, but no switches for anything other than this manual mirror switch. That's great because all of the power window switches are here in the middle. And that's the way Mercedes did it for a long time. And you can see this is starting to look like their later cars. I grew up with a W124 300E, or 300 class as they called it. And this doesn't look that different from that. Now, that was wood down here, but we had the fader button here, the power window switch was here, very similar gear shift, and the ashtray was here. This, of course, this climate control system, which obviously isn't working, was improved and looked a little bit better later on. Like this massive compressor switch, on, off, it's on. Now I have air conditioning, it's off. Now I don't. But the temperature wheel, interesting enough, is in Fahrenheit. And my dad's 89 300E was in Celsius. We didn't know what that meant. 21 degrees, that's freezing, you know. But interesting that back in the 70s, 12 years earlier, they had it in Fahrenheit. Interesting. So here's your power antenna control and various and sundry other switches and knobs and dials and a glove box, which does have a light that's not working. But, you know, that's to be expected. This car is old. And then, of course, you have your HVAC vents here. Your metal sliding sunroof up here, and which would be that switch, and then of course your ignition switch right there. But additionally, you have MB Tech seats. These seats are as old as I am, and you would never know because they have a lot less wrinkles than I do. But there's probably some gray hair in there because I think Mercedes still used horsehair to stuff their seats back then. And yeah, this definitely has an aroma of Mercedes about it. So this is a fuel-injected car. Let me get y'all mounted up here on the windshield. We'll fire this up and just take for a quick spin before all the coolant leaks out. If I make that joke a couple more times, it will all have leaked out, so stay tuned. Maybe I'll be calling a wrecker. So one other thing, these unusually shaped seatbelt buckles. Yep. All right, there we go. This one's got a little bit of fraying in it, so hopefully I won't be in a wreck. But safety third. Ride right up. Idling a little over 1,000, but the temperature's pretty cool. So select reverse, and boy, yeah, you can listen to that gear whine. Wow. Interestingly, I just now noticed this one does not have a rear window defroster. There's no wires back there. This is the first time I've ever driven an S-Class from this era. I've never, as far as I know, even been in a W116. It feels like a pretty big car. I mean, it's not necessarily massive by modern standards at any stage of its size. You know, the W126 was the successor to this, and that's the car I think of as an 80s kid, although these were still being made when I was very, very young. of an S as an S-Class. This to me was an old car, and wow, it definitely, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but wow, going around that corner, you know, the suspension is soft in this car. It's supposed to be. It's an S-Class. It's supposed to be comfortable, and having that gun sight on the hood is just really cool. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm on a side street here, so I'm only getting up to about 30 miles an hour right here, but we'll take it out on the open road here in a second. I have a regular route I use when I'm up here in Virginia driving cars at my friend's place, and it's fairly quiet. You can hear a little bit of the straight six, but that's not a bad thing. Give her a little bit of the boot here. I'm actually wearing boots. Yep. That's about 40 now. I mean, this is not a fast car. It's a big car for the era, and it's got no horsepower whatsoever. Obviously, the 450 SEL 6.9 was the car to have in 1977. It was probably the best car manufactured then, because the 911s of the era had that magnesium casing on the transmission and just had some other issues with that 2.7. But this car, with the 6.9 liter engine and the hydropneumatic suspension, would have been the most amazing thing, because it had 300 horsepower. It just unheard of for the era. I mean, in Melee's era in the US especially, you know, everybody laments the bumpers on these things, and it makes everybody overseas just cringe whenever I post a picture of them about how terrible they were. Keep in mind, we didn't know any different. I mean, there was no internet back then, so we didn't really see a whole lot of pictures or video of what these cars looked like overseas. It's a bit wallowy in ride, but you know, it's also 46 years old now. But it doesn't feel unsafe. It is a Mercedes after all, so it's going to have some feeling of stability, even if it's soft. You know, it feels like a long car. I regularly drive a Lincoln Town car, which is much more modern, but I have that sense of, even though the rear view mirror is right here, and I see nothing but glass and behind me, I don't see the rear seat. This car doesn't have the optional rear headrests, obviously, but it feels really long. You kind of get that ship boat feel out of it, which is fine. It's not even the L, this is just the SE. I could definitely see driving this cross country again if the AC were fixed. That may just be a belt, I don't know. The owner just got this car. It had actually been at a Barrett-Jackson auction as well. I need to look up the listing for that, but that's not where he got it from. So anyway, this is fun. As I said, I grew up driving a slightly more modern Mercedes, but I can definitely see the heritage in that car from this one. This model introduced a lot of features to the Mercedes product line. Of course, the S-Class has been renowned for doing that. Like, legitimately, stuff that trickles down to, like the Nissan Versa that I drove last week, came from an S-Class. And, you know, you could get four-wheel ABS was an option in this car in 1978. This is 77, so it was not yet available, but you know, this was also the first car that came with a turbo diesel standard. The 300 SD or SDL was basically just for the US market, which is odd because now no one has diesels in the US unless it's a big pickup truck. Really, like they're just not available. Like they're not sold. They're not available at all for any type of vehicle other than like major big pickup trucks and some Volkswagens, but they've had their own issues. So the fact that this was only available in the US, when, you know, we think of diesels as being huge in Europe, but they weren't that. They wanted the gas engines, and so that's why I jumped at the chance to drive this, because a lot of these were sold as 300 SDs, not the gas model. So it's so much quieter and more refined. The Mercedes diesels at that time were really loud and clattery. They were fantastic engines, don't get me wrong, but they were not luxury car quiet. They definitely were clattery and noisy and smoky. I mean, and that's kind of why at some point diesels fell out of favor in the US, because people had that that thought process about what they were like. And coming up here to as for unknown construction site, so it gives me more time to run my mouth while I sit here and wait for them to flag us through. You know, this is a comfortable place to be. I've got a nice big cushy armrest. I'm in my bouncy Mercedes MB-Tech seat. The four-wheel disc brakes, which they all came standard with, hauled this car down very nicely to a stop behind this F-150 here. And you know, there's a little chug to the engine, which is not unpleasant. It's a very good, robust straight six, and that fuel injection system, if it's maintained properly, is actually really good. You know, it's not tunable, it's not electronic. There's nothing you can do to change how the fuel injection system operates, but I used it for decades. Bosch made tons of these electronics, and you know, rebuilding them is a pain in the butt, but if they are working, that's great. Yeah, compared to other cars of the 1970s, 1977, let's see, we had, for big US cars, a lot of them had just been downsized. General Motors had just downsized the Caprice, the DeVille, the Olds, the Buicks, but they were not going to have a full gauge package. They had the sweep speedometer. They did not have a lot of the features this car had. They still had bench seats and mouse for upholstery, and most of these came with probably MB Techs or leather, especially if you got the L model or one of the people who got the V8s. And we must have. So obviously this was much more expensive, and if you were to get a Cadillac Sedan DeVille, say, you would automatically have gotten a V8 and all of these creature comfort features, which is why Mercedes had to sell these in the US with things that were never standard overseas. I mean, climate control, the S-Class, sure, they probably had some with those sold in Europe, but you know, I mean, every Cadillac had that standard, every Lincoln, you couldn't get one without it. And obviously our climate is such where, you know, something like air conditioning is a requirement. I couldn't fathom, I mean, there's no car sold in the US for many, many years, decades probably, that hasn't had it standard. Just no one would buy it. It would cost more to make the 3 cars a year that someone would buy without AC than just to put it in every car. So these are the types of cars that started that happening. And all of the things that are in this SEL, which were not uncommon in the mid-70s in the US anyway, are now in whatever base model car you could possibly go. Whatever rental car you could get off the lot, the cheapest one is going to have the power windows, the probably climate control. This doesn't even have power mirrors. They didn't for years in a Mercedes. Automatic transmission, cruise control, all this stuff. And keep in mind, this is the base S-Class. This is just how they came. Sunroof even, you know, that's still an option on a lot of cars, but this was, I guess these were moon roofs because, or whatever the terminology difference is, because these obviously are metal, and you don't get to slide this back and look out. It's just a big metal panel, and I'm not opening it because I don't know if it works, and I'm not about to have that thing break in the open position, because you know that's what would happen, and that's not happening on my watch. So, all right, well, I'm going to limp this back because of the coolant issue that you've seen, but I'm going to give it on this last road here that heads back to where the car lives, a little bit more gas just to see what happens. But that's down to the floor. 30, 35, 40. I'm hearing a lot of noise, about 3,500 RPM. And it shifted. Now I'm going about 50. So yeah, this thing is Melee's era slow, but you know what? It's unhurried. Everything was Melee's slow then, so nobody knew any different. And it's still a comfortable ride. I enjoy this a lot. You know, I've driven some other S-Classes, and I've driven plenty of other Mercedes, and I've driven plenty of V8 Mercedes, but this 116, I really liked it. And, you know, it's just a neat car. This was already a 5-year-old body style by the time that this car came out. So everything that had been done to it could have been done, and it was only made a couple more years before they came out with the 126, which was obviously a superior design that ushered in the modern design language for Mercedes, really, more so than this. But this looks like the W123 that everybody loves, that came in that station wagon body. And yeah, it's just an interesting timepiece, and I'm glad I got to drive this. So I'm gonna hop out real quick. I'll show you what the trunk looks like. I'll give you my closing thoughts, and we'll move on. I forgot these have crazy weird wipers. Look at that. What? That's hilarious. So it's actually a pretty shallow trunk in here, but nicely lined for the era. You have a spare down here, which is full size, and obviously also has a regular steel wheel because of the full hubcaps, and then it clangs when it closes. So yeah, they hadn't really refined that yet, and they definitely would in future years, because I remember that 300E that my dad had just having the just a bank vault close on that trunk lid, and it was nicely lined inside. You know, it was just a beautiful car. But this this is a beautiful car too, even if it is taxi yellow, and despite these bumpers, this is the way they were. People can change these out, but I think you gotta keep it the way it is, because there's not a whole lot of these left. And with that, that's the W116 Mercedes 1977 280 SE, the base model S-Class, as I've been telling the owner, which he really loves to hear, but I'm not wrong. Thanks y'all so much for watching Doug's Cars. I've got some more awesome content coming your way real quick. So hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see y'all soon.